Hello, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Pablo. I'll be facilitating this session, which will be a game session. We are all going to be experiencing what it means to be a farmer in a location where rains, you don't know what may happen, you don't know if your crops may do well, you don't know if you'll be able to feed your family. Pretty much like a lot of the real world. So, in this game, each one of you has become a farmer. We'll start with the lower part of the river watershed. In that lower part, you can see that there are 2 plots of land per player. You own some land. One of them is red, is away from the river, it's not very fertile soil. Every time you plant one bean, if the rains are good, you harvest one more bean. And then you end up with 2. Now there is another plot of land, which is closer to the river, has more fertile soil. With the same amount of rain coming from the river, if you planted one, it gives you 2 more, because it's more fertile. Now, you will start the game with 3, and you can choose to plant only one in the fertile soil, or only one in the other poorer soil, or both. Now, of course, the rains are outside of your control. The rains are going to be captured by this little die. There's 6 sides. We're going to roll it. Most years it will be good rains, a 4, a 3, a 5, a 6. But from time to time, you may get a 1. A 1 is too little rain. It's a drought. What it means is that if you planted one bean, no matter where you planted, no rain came from the sky, you're in trouble. Your crop fails, you produce no food. Let's give it a try. Now try, you have 3 beans, where are you going to plant them? Go ahead, there's going to be a countdown for you to make the decision. 1, the other, or both. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. When I say stop, no more planting, because the planting season has ended. The rains are coming, we roll the die, whoops, a drought. Everything you planted is up. If I had rolled a 6 or anything bigger than a 1, you'd have a harvest, the assistants would give you the harvest. Now, after the rains, after the harvest, what happens is that you have to eat, you have to feed your family. Keeping your family well-fed and healthy will cost you 2 beans per season. So, you make your decisions, there's a countdown, then we roll the die, harvest or no depending on rains, and then you have to pay. Now, guess what? If you have to pay 2 and you don't have enough, you're in trouble. What are you going to do? In this game, if you don't have enough to feed your family, your only choice is to migrate. You have to go out. You have to physically stand up and leave the game. Is that clear? Then let's give it a try. Let's start another round. Everyone start with 3 for practice. Distribute 3. Everyone starts with 3. Make your decisions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. See what happens. There will be rains. You harvest or not. Then you pay your 2, and we start again. Now let's introduce the upper side of the basin. This part looks different. If you look at it, there's different plots of land because it's steeper slope. Because of the steeper slopes, the soil is not so fertile as close to the river. In each plot of land, if you plant one, the best you can do is to harvest 1 more. All plots are red. All plots are not so fertile. So as usual, you have a choice to plant only 1 bean in one of the plots, or you can plant both. Then the rains will come. Now, what's the difference between the upper basin and the lower basin? What we know is that in this particular part of the world represented in the game, the upper basin never has a problem of drought because they have more rain than down there. The representation of more rain is going to be with a different die. 1 die per player in the upper basin. So we give 1 to you, 1 to you, 1 to you, and so on. So the rains in your particular plot of land here depends not only on the regional rains, but also on your local rains. So we first roll the regional, then we roll the local. and we make the sum of the two. This is what determines your rains. The sum of the two can range from a double 1, 1 plus 1 equals 2, the smallest amount, all the way to a double 6. That's too much rain. In the upper basin, you don't have drought risk, but you have flood risk. If you get 10 or more, that's a flood. What it means is that it rains too much, it washes away your crops, you have crop failure. So you choose how much to plant. There's the countdown, as always, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop planting, roll the regional, then each one of you will roll the local, and then do the math. If the summation is 9 or less, you're fine, you harvest. If it's 10 or more, you got a flat crop failure. And after the harvest, good or bad, you have to pay your 2 beans to stay healthy. Is that clear? All right, another practice round. All right, now that you've practiced a few times, we're going to add something else. As you know, in many countries, farmers not only have farmland, but there's also forest, there's trees. And if you want, you can chop down a tree, you can cut it down and sell the wood for money. In this game, we're going to say that each one of these little blue stones represents a tree, a good, mature, healthy tree that you can sell. If you cut it down, you can sell it, and what you get in exchange is 4 beans. Cut one tree, sell it, get 4 beans. So, of course, we're going to have a lot of trees in the upper basin, because up in the mountains there's often bigger forest. So we're going to give 5 little trees, mature trees, to each one of the players playing in the upper basin. The lower river basin doesn't have as many trees, so we're going to give 3 trees. These 3 trees are not close to the river. Even if there's a big flood coming from there, there's no problem. Now, guess what? Things are getting a little bit complicated because the world is complicated. Let's imagine that rains are fine up in the upper basin. It rains, all is good. It rains over there, all is good. You all harvest. But suppose that we got a 6 in the regional rains, and this person got a flood because he rolled 5. 6 plus 5 is 11, that's too much rain. And this one got a 4, 6 plus 4 is 10, that's also a flood. If more than one player gets flooded, that means that the flood is big. It's a big flood that goes downstream and washes away and destroys all the crops in the green fertile crops. Instead of harvesting +2, you lose everything. What happens upstream affects the harvest downstream. More than one player flooded in the upper basin, no harvest in the lower basin in the plots next to the river. Let's give it a try. Make your planting decisions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. Now, imagine, I did roll a 5. Let's roll all of the local ones. And if there's only one player flooded or less, no problem. If there's more than one player flooded, trouble. Those plots don't produce. Moving on. Now we're going to add something cool. The trees. We know that the upper basin has a lot of forest, usually more than the lower basin. So each player is going to start with 5 trees. You can cut one tree, and in exchange you get 4 beans. Cut one tree, sell the wood, gain 4 beans, and these beans you can either use for consumption after the harvest, or you can use for planting. Cutting trees, of course, is something that people may have to do even if they don't want to. Remember, if you can't pay for your food, you have to migrate and leave the game. Now, there's another part of the complication. What happens if you cut down a lot of trees in the upper basin? Well, it used to be that you needed to have a lot of rain, 10 or more, to cause flooding in your land and maybe cause flooding downstream. But if you cut down trees, there's a point at which the same rain that came from the sky and used to be fine, now because of lack of forest, it comes down at full speed and washes away stuff and destroys crops. So in this game for the upper basin, if instead of 5 or 4 of these mature trees, you find yourself with 3 or more, it means that you have deforested so much that you have increased your own flood risk. How? Well, if you roll a 9, which used to be safe, it's now a flood. It's a flood for you and you're flooded. And if someone else is flooded as well, then more than one flooded upstream means flood downstream. That's trouble. Let's give it a try. Make your planting decisions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. Roll the regional, roll the local, and whoop, check this out. I actually literally got a 9. Any player who has 3 trees or less because of previous deforestation, that player is flooded. And if there's more than one player flooded upstream, the green plots downstream have their crop washed away and ruined. Let's add one more rule. If you keep cutting trees, there's going to be no forest, right? So we're going to introduce young trees. This little yellow stone in this game represents a young tree. Of course, when you play in your community, you can substitute these two by any other object that is in your community, a stick, a little pine cone, whatever works. This is a mature tree. This is a young tree. You can buy one of these for 2 beans. You buy a young tree, you plant it, and after some time, it matures. Only after it has matured, you can cut it down and sell the wood. What we're going to do is, you can see that there's little rectangles with numbers. When you buy one, you plant it and place it in the little square that has a number 1. That tree is not useful yet. It's trying to grow. We're going to roll the die. If all goes well, you move it from 1 to 2. Next year, you roll, and if all goes well, you move to 3. It becomes mature. But guess what? If you just planted the tree, and there's a drought, mature trees are fine. They have deep roots. They can survive. But the young trees, they die. So any trees that were planted this season, we roll, we get a drought, that little tree seedling dies. Chances are it will do well. So let's give it a try. Does anyone want to buy a tree? Make your decisions. You can cut an old one, get 4 beans, then buy your food or buy your seeds or buy a new tree. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. Some of you have planted the yellow, the young tree. We throw the die. It's a 2, no problem. Local rains go. All right. When you roll the regional, if it's no drought, you move the young trees from 1 to 2. Next year, they will be safe already. Once they are in square number 2, even a drought doesn't kill them. They will mature. So now, let's give it another round of practice. What we recommend to facilitators is that if any of the players find themselves wiped out, you can either force them to sell their trees, or you can inject some new beans as if it were from humanitarian aid or donor or something. You as facilitator will need to regulate when you see that too many people are wiped out. You can inject new beans, or you can say, okay, we start the game again. Okay, by now you know almost all the rules of the game. One thing we didn't say is that it's perfectly fine for players to exchange as they want. One player may loan a bean, one player may give away a bean, or buy a little young tree and give it to someone else. You guys can facilitate and enable the community to come up with their own ideas for interaction, for collaboration within upper basin, lower basin, or across. we really don't want you as facilitator to push solutions down the throat of the players. They have to have the solutions emerge from themselves. It's very important as you facilitate that you only provide the rules. In the beginning, people will be confused. It's okay. Warn them that it will be confusing. But don't play the game for them. It's very important that they own, that the players inhabit the complexity and own that game experience, including the good ideas that they say, how about you help me now, I help you later. Those are the things that the game is designed to facilitate, to create, to promote. So after you've played a few more rounds in the practice mode, we say, okay, now we start for real. You play 1 or 2 rounds where people are already familiar with the rules and they're going to begin to exchange. It's very important as facilitator to figure out how to time the regional reigns. You want to put pressure. If they're talking and they're about to come up with a good idea, let them develop it, but then implementation takes discussion. Say, okay, the rains are coming. You have a countdown. By the end of the countdown, you either plant it or not. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. And maybe someone was going to loan a bean, someone was going to plant a tree, but if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. You roll the reins, and there you go. Another thing we do is to introduce, after a few rounds of real gameplay, a core aspect of this game, which is the idea of climate change. Here's how we normally present it. You know, these regional rains are roughly what has been happening for the past generations. The rains could be anywhere between 1 and 6. Most years rains were good. Occasionally you had a drought. Sometimes you had a lot of rain, which was bad news for the upper basin. But guess what? The climate is changing. We keep hearing from farmers, from fishermen, from a lot of people that the rains are no longer what they used to be. It looks different. Indeed, sometimes it rains so intensely that people have never experienced such rain. So in this game, we're going to, after 2 or 3 rounds, substitute the usual regional rains with this special object, climate change. This object, it's actually called an octahedron. It's like a die, but with 8 dice. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides. You will be given a print for paper to cut it and mount it and fold it and glue it. You have to add the numbers, and then instead of rolling these regional rains, you will roll that one. Another 5, but guess what? Eventually, this object will, like right now, show an 8 or a 7. What that means is that the risk of flooding upstream is much higher. When the farmers up here roll their local rains, even a 2 will be trouble for most. When you added this rule, you can add a variation, which is that for the upper basin to have a flood, if, like in the beginning, 5 or 4 trees in your property means that you need a roll of the dice of 10 or more to be flooded. If instead of 5 or 4 you had only 3, remember that a 9 was already causing a flood. But if you invest a lot in planting trees and you eventually have 6 or more trees, guess what? You're protecting the land. You need much more rain to cause a flood. So a 10 no longer causes a flood. If you planted more trees, if you have 6 or more trees, it takes an 11 or more to cause a flood. And that, of course, is an incentive not only for the players upstream to plant more trees, but also for the folks in the lower river basin, because more afforestation upstream means less risk of flooding downstream. With that, you have learned all the rules. The idea is to play a few times. As a facilitator, allow for conversation, for trading, for discussion, occasionally put pressure and bring in the regional rains in their normal way or in their climate change way. And when you think the time is right, usually after about an hour or so of gameplay, you say, Thank you very much. This has been great. What have we learned? And you invite a conversation. To the extent possible, don't be the one pushing the solutions. We want the community to talk, not the external visitors to be the ones doing the talking. If you want, you could add a prize. You could give a chocolate to the player that ends the game with the most beans, or anything like that. It's not necessary. If you have any ideas on how to improve the game, to make it more tailored to your own community, give it a try. Just test it thoroughly before you change a rule and try it with the communities, because this game took a lot of fine-tuning of the numbers for it to work well. If you have any questions or comments, contact your regional teams. This game has been produced by the Partners for Resilience, Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, in collaboration with CARE and the Nicaraguan Red Cross and Wetlands International and Cordate and Caritas. It's teamwork, and we know that the game can support a serious but fun teamwork for you all. Thank you so much. Looking forward to more, and here's a website with more information. All the best to you.
Aprender más.
Yo creo que nos va a servir a todos y todas.
Solo se podrá sembrar un grano por parcela, y que si el invierno es bueno, ustedes van a ganar 2. Pero que si el invierno es malo, ustedes lo pueden perder todo.
Entonces, primero eligen si plantar acá, si plantar en la más fértil o si plantar en las dos. Pero ¿qué pasa? Puede pasar que las lluvias no sean buenas. Si sale un 3, la lluvia es normal. Si sale un 5, la lluvia es mucha, es generosa. Pero si sale un 1, ¿qué pasa? Se pierden los frutos.
Nosotros sabemos, ¿verdad?, que si nosotros tiramos a perder todo, tendríamos que emigrar, ¿verdad?
Esta es la última regla del juego. Este dado ha representado las lluvias regionales. ¿Pero qué está pasando ahora? El clima está cambiando. Están pasando cosas locas. ¿Qué vamos a hacer? Vamos a reemplazar este por este. Este es un dado especial que en lugar de 6 caras tiene 8. La amenaza es más grande. ¡Ay, salió un 8! Y vemos que salió 8 y 6, 14, una gran inundación. 8 y 5, 13, enorme inundación. 8 y 1, 9. Habría sido una inundación, pero por suerte plantamos arbolito, nos salvamos. El 9 no causa. ¿Sí?
Tenemos que reforestar.
Conservar más esta parte de arriba para que se conserve también la parte de abajo.
Que una parte lo elige para reforestar y otra parte para el consumo de las comidas.
Con este juego nos da a entender mucho, ¿verdad?, de que tenemos que ser personas, que tenemos que cuidar nuestra naturaleza.
También el juego me demuestra de que los árboles son seres vivos, de que también los ayudan a sobrevivir a nosotros y también que las comunidades estemos organizados, estemos unidos, que trabajemos en un mismo sentido.